Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much. We are so happy you could be here today. As everyone is filing in, hello and welcome once again. We're going to go ahead and get started in 1 minute. We'll give others a chance to get in here. Thank you once again. My name is Althea Rowe. Thank you for joining us again. I know I said that. Hello and welcome. My name is Althea Rowe. Thank you for joining us for this 30-minute webinar in our Research to Policy Critical Conversations in Language Education series. This year's theme is Technologically Mediated Learning in Multilingual Contexts. We are examining the impact of technological innovation on learning in multilingual settings with a particular focus on AI. Today's webinar is Reverse Designing Responses to Emerging Technologies in Multilingual Contexts, and we will be speaking with Ahmed Dursun, Catherine Bowman, and Nicholas Swinehart. I am joined by Marguerite Lukes from our Board of Trustees and Shauna Cannon from Cal staff. We are recording this webinar and will post the recording on our website after the event. Before we begin, please mute your microphone to avoid interruptions. You can activate closed captioning by pressing the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. This event is provided as a public service. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed belong solely to the guest speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of our organization. Our panel comprises esteemed experts who work at the intersection of research, policy, and practice in language education, language access, and equity. You can learn more about them on the webinar's webpage. We will share the link in the chat. We do encourage you to ask questions via the Q&A box throughout the call. We will answer as many as possible at the end of our discussion. It's an excellent opportunity to tap into the wealth of knowledge we are fortunate to have here today. Also, please click the chat button at the bottom of your screen to share your thoughts and comments anytime. Try it out now by letting us know where you are listening from today. And with that, I'll now pass the microphone to our facilitators.
Thank you so much, Althea. I'm so pleased to be here today. So I'm going to turn to Ahmed, Catherine, and Nick and ask you our first question. So emerging technologies, when helping instructors respond to emerging technologies, especially like generative AI, how do you shape your approach?
So I'll answer that first question and just say hello from Chicago, where the three of us are, University of Chicago. It's wonderful to see all the different locations, including international locations that people are joining from. So since 2016, the Chicago Language Center and the Office of Language Assessment have been engaged in two big grant-supported initiatives supporting professional development and pedagogical innovation. And one of them was from the Mellon Foundation, really, and specifically targeted less commonly taught languages. The other was an internal grant that spanned, we continue to work with over 35, closer to 40 modern languages here at Chicago. And this work that we've been doing with over 200 instructors, 54 institutions, and 47 languages has evolved into an approach. The approach really informs everything we do, but also informs our approach to a challenge like dealing with the possibilities and challenges of AI. It is a proficiency-oriented, assessment-driven, reverse design approach. I'm going to walk through it, and I think one of my colleagues can put oh, there it is. Thank you. There's a link in the chat to this depiction of the approach, a link to our website, and there are a few other resources there that my colleagues will be mentioning probably during this webinar. So this is a proficiency-oriented approach because we reframe language learning and it's the goals of language instruction as equipping students with skills they can use in the real world after graduation. So we really focus on language skills after you leave academia. In other words, I'm not teaching first-year Persian, so you'll take second-year Persian. Of course, hope they take second year Persian. I'm teaching Persian, so you have skills in Persian that will really equip you with skills, functional ability across all 4 skills you can use as a student, but also enhancing any career possibility. And we also know that kind of messaging really speaks to the Gen Z students. They want to know what they can do with what they in the real world with what they learn in college. So if I'm claiming proficiency skills or delivery of proficiency skills, I need to test them and I need to define them. So that informs the assessment-driven component of our approach, which is before we talk about curricula or what you're doing in your curricula, our participants in our workshops and our colleagues identify end-of-sequence outcomes using the ACTFL guidelines. But the real assessment-driven and the really unique assessment-driven aspect of our approach is that we work very closely, especially Ahmet's office, working with our colleagues and all of our workshop participants to create their own 4 skills proficiency assessments. So they really become their assessments. And we have some research that really supports, first of all, an assumption that many of our colleagues do not have a lot of training in assessment literacy, and also that these elements, assessment literacy and designing your own assessments, deliver professional identity and agency to our instructors. So only when those things are in place do we now turn to curricular development or choices about curricular development. So they have outcomes identified and assessments for those outcomes. And positioning curricular development here is really the hallmark of reverse design. You know your outcomes and you know how your outcomes are going to be measured. We've also found that positioning it there using this reverse design approach makes it possible for instructors to make very deliberate choices about the thousands of things they have to decide when designing curricula. So we don't tell people what to do. Instead, we give them, we offer workshops guided by what we call 6 curricular principles. And they are reverse design, a focus on functional language use, the role of formative assessment, the purposeful use of materials, and maximizing in-class and out-of-class activities, really the flip design. The 6th principle is about the use of technology, strategic use of technology. Specifically, and this is where our approach to AI comes in, implementing multimedia or technology to achieve goals. It should enhance instruction, not drive it. And then using technology to help students develop these target functions and to help instructors implement reverse design, the flip model, communicative activities, and formative assessments. So this same approach, this 6th principle, also really informs our work in the use of or implementation of generative AI. So it's really part of an overall approach to assessment and pedagogy.
Super. Thanks so much, Catherine. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Shauna Cannon from Cal.
So you briefly mentioned this, and we'd like to know more about the research that informs this approach and the research's impact on instructor roles, the learning dynamic, or the learning environment.
So I will take this question. As Kathy described, the reverse design approach as a professional development program in this case, relies on 2 interrelated bodies of research. On the first leg, I think it is the research about assessment literacy, and we can describe assessment literacy in general terms. In this case, instructors' knowledge and understanding of the fundamental assessment concepts, principles, and procedures, and in my opinion, its impact on their instructional practices and decisions. So as Kathy mentioned, in the reverse design model, test design and development is indispensable part of this reverse engineering. Therefore, to have such a model, someone needs to investigate instructors or stakeholders' assessment literacy needs in this case. So what does this body of research tells us regarding the need itself? So we can say the whole research synthesis can be summarized into two things here. So first of all, we can see, language instructors, especially less commonly taught language instructors, have limited training in assessment. And most of these trainings actually they had comes from workshops, conferences, rather than the degree program they were actually studying. So that shows us two trends here. First, the need for assessment literacy is increasing as the knowledge area becomes more technical in assessment in this case. And secondly, particularly when we were looking at assessment literacy with regard to the duties that instructors undertake, as part of their job organically, there is a mismatch. So that is, most of the instructors had to undertake assessment-related duties that they did not have training for. So I believe these findings regarding the need for assessment literacy, I think, provides insight, regarding the topic we're discussing today, and regarding, the idea of how to approach and how to respond when we encounter emerging technology. In this case, artificial intelligence. So as I said, there are two bodies of research. The second body is interrelated to the first one. And in the second body of research is mainly regarding the impact of assessment literacy. What happens when you provide this assessment literacy, then so what? So we can see in this body of research that assessment literacy plays a very pivotal role in shaping effective instructional practices. It also helps instructors measure students' learning outcomes. It also empowers instructors to make informed decisions when selecting and designing assessments for their students, and also when they plan instructional practices accordingly. Also, solid assessment literacy research has shown can help instructors make accurate judgments about student learning and performance. Finally, in this body of research, one of the results that we found in our own study here that we conducted with the population that Kathy has mentioned, we have been training, we have seen the instructors reported increasing confidence in presenting their expertise when they have this literacy. Also a well-defined sense of professional identity, which is very critical. And then which gives this professional identity, gives them a greater agency in their actual work. So how is this connected to what we are discussing today? Since we are having this discussion as part of a series called Research to Policy, and then we really don't have much research yet regarding the assessment literacy needs and impact of AI on language instructors. That is to come, and I'm sure a lot of people are investigating this kind of questions right now. But we can learn from this assessment literacy some stuff. So in a nutshell, what we can say, literacy empowers. It empowers instructors, and it is through this power of literacy that the instructors or stakeholders can make intentional decisions regarding the instructional practices. In this case, including the use of artificial intelligence, and also the strategies and the purposeful use of AI is not different in this case. It just becomes another choice to make. But when you have the literacy to do so, you have the power to make those choices. That's how I will end.
Thank you.
Okay. You mentioned university. You all are in the context of a university. And looking specifically at generative AI, in many university contexts, and I know this from my own experience, there have not been very clear policies on the use of AI. in particular, generative AI. How should policies on the use of AI be informed in the university context? What kind of framework do you think we need to create sensible but also ethical policies?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So I mean, first I'll just start by talking about kind of what we are doing now and in the Language Center. And so with this reverse design approach, we kind of start with the end goals, right? And so one of our end goals here is real world outcomes, right? And so in terms of generative AI, these tools are out there in the real world and they're being used in the world. You know, in the business world, I think they're being used in lots of ways that they don't quite have the hesitancy that many people in academia have, for better or worse. And so if we're preparing learners to use the target language out in the real world, I think we need to have them prepared for these tools as well. Another end goal for us is proficiency development. So how can learners actually use the language and how can we measure that, not just their knowledge of grammar, vocabulary, et cetera. And so with these tools, we try to focus, we think there are good ways these tools can be used to help learners develop proficiency. And there are bad ways that can kind of short circuit and shortcut the learning in terms of just using it to do your homework for you. And so focusing on the extent that we're using these tools, focusing on what are some of those ways that these tools can benefit proficiency development. For example, with some of the new voice tools on ChatGPT and now on Copilot, if you have access 24/7 to a language partner and tutor in your pocket that never gets tired and you can chat with as much as you want. Not saying that's better than having a human partner to speak with, but it's better than not having those speaking opportunities, right? We would say. And so I think the more that we can shape learners' use of these tools towards those good uses, if we're not doing that, then what's to keep them from? They're just, they're going to use the tools maybe in those bad ways, more likely. Another end goal for us is agency, both for learners and for instructors. And so for instructors, that means some top-down guidance and literacy building, like Amit talked about, but also plenty of room for bottom-up agency where instructors have the freedom to choose how they want to implement or not, or the policies for their classroom related to these tools. So making sure, like Kathy said, not telling them what to do, but helping them have the information they need to make informed decisions. And so then after looking at those kind of what are the goals, then also thinking what are some guardrails that we need to kind of mitigate unintended or negative consequences, right? For example, questions about academic integrity, questions about equal access to these tools. So what are we doing at U of Chicago? We've developed a AI literacy course that I taught this past summer. And right now we're working on how can we take that course that was kind of designed for, smaller cohorts, how can we make that more accessible to all of our instructors at the University of Chicago? That's a challenge we're working on right now. We have established, like Kathy said, we don't set policy, but we try to provide some guidance. And so we've created a sample syllabus statement that basically takes the goals that we've been talking about here and kind of puts it in a statement that instructors can use what they agree with. And this is in the resources that we've linked to, just as a way to kind of have some guidance and recommendations for our instructors. So as far as guardrails, we also are looking at what our university trying to help instructors understand what our university does and doesn't say about these tools when it comes to academic integrity, and making sure that they're thinking about if these policies aren't explicitly said in the university-wide guidance, making sure that instructors are thinking about their own course and communicating clearly with their students what their expectations are in their classroom.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
So, you've started to answer this. Is there anything else that you would suggest as next steps that you might recommend for teachers, administrators, or policymakers who need to respond to the challenges of generative AI?
Yeah, I would say kind of like we've talked about here, starting with establishing your kind of non-negotiable goals. What are what are the goals that you are trying to, so not just, I mean, AI is the buzzword and it's everywhere. And so not just responding because it's a hot thing, but trying to keep in mind what are the goals you're trying to work towards, and how can you make sure that whatever your kind of approach is working towards those goals. Like I said, kind of try to identify some of those negative effects and consequences that you need to protect, put up guardrails to protect against, and think about how, what kind of guardrails you need. Really importantly is, we've talked a lot about literacy building. So developing a strategy for literacy building. How are you going to help your kind of stakeholders get the literacy they need to use these tools in informed ways? And very importantly there is setting aside the resources, funding, human, otherwise, to help get these, to get this literacy in place, right? Like I said, this is a very hot topic, and so people are kind of rushing towards it. But I think if people are saying, we want, here are these tools, here are ways you can use them, really thinking about how are we going to help people get the literacy they need to use them in informed ways. And just one advantage of all of this is, one advantage for administrators or policymakers with this kind of literacy-based approach is, once you develop this literacy among the people kind of working with you, then that kind of frees up a lot of these kind of day-to-day questions, and kind of those people can then take that literacy and work on their own. For example, Amit has worked with a bunch of instructors at our university and other institutions to develop these proficiency-based tests, right? And he could have said, here's this test. Now you kind of tweak it in little ways for your language and your language and your language. But instead, his approach is to really help them gain the literacy and build the test following certain principles, build that test themselves, so that now if they have questions about this, that, he doesn't need to answer a bunch of these smaller questions, because they know how to develop these tests. They know why these tests are in place and why they're designed that way. And so that's really a benefit for policymakers in that area.
Excellent. It looks like, thank you so much, Nick and Amit and Catherine. We have some questions in the chat, and they're kind of going down two strands. One of the questions is calling for examples. I think you see the chat yourself. Going back to the focus on reverse design, can you give some examples or samples of reverse design? Maybe you could walk us through, what an instructor did, or a course, so people can think about it in a real setting. I
think so. Happy to do that. First of all, I guess I should say we use the term reverse design instead of backward design. We like reverse design because it resonates with the idea of reverse engineering. So what you're really doing is reverse engineering your curriculum from a set of outcomes, but also with the knowledge of how it's going to be tested. So, and for people for whom reverse design might be a new concept, whenever we do these workshops, I like to ask the group of people, what's the best way to get there? Should I take a bus or an Uber? So, Marguerite and Shauna, which one should I take? Or why can't you answer that question?
Well, I know I'm sitting here in Brooklyn. My first question would be from a reverse design approach. When do I need to get there?
No, and where am I going?
Where am I going? Exactly.
You don't know where I'm going. So the hallmark of reverse design is, if you know where you want to take your learners, let's say to intermediate mid reading, and you know how it's going to be tested, when you think about teaching your reading curriculum, you can make better choices. And it's really true, Nick's example, this now works, as Nick was explaining, for AI. If you know what you're teaching and how you want to teach it, you can think, how is AI going to enhance that? Not drive it, not change it, but how do I want to use AI to do what I'm already trying to do? So you work back from the way the goal you have for your learners, the way you're going to measure whether you got to the goal, which is the assessment design part. Then you think about all the curricular pieces, and that's how reverse design really works for sometimes when we start a meeting, we say, what's the goal of this meeting? let's reverse design from the goal and figure out what do we need to do to have this be a successful meeting. So for us, it really works for thinking about a lot of things.
There's
So I
another-
think,
Go ahead. Go
sorry.
ahead.
How would you suggest, what are the ways, some practical ways that we might develop these AI literacy skills for our students? Do you have any quick suggestions, or is that located in the resources?
I'll take that one. I think that, I mean, you know, there's a bunch of, I know that one of the issues now is that there are kind of so many different sources of information and noise out there now that it's hard to know which to choose. And I don't have a great answer for that. But I think that, looking around at your institution, and if there isn't much, I mean, first starting with the instructor trying to develop basic AI literacy. One way that you can do that is take our course next summer. But until then, I mean, also on our blog posts, and we have some resources where, again, one thing we're trying to do is send out some little bits of literacy building to everybody via our blog. So as an instructor, just trying to build that basic literacy yourself, there are lots of kind of YouTube channels, whether it's from Google or from other kind of known entities that where you can kind of, I would recommend choosing one of those, just one or two, and kind of working through as much of that as you can. And then taking that and looking at what your school may provide. If your school doesn't provide much, trying to talk to people at your school and get more information and try to work with people to say, okay, what do we need to be saying about this? And I think, we've talked a lot about this reverse design stuff. And so once instructors can have like basic AI literacy for themselves, and then kind of looking at, okay, what is, and I would say triaging, like what's the most urgent thing for my students. First is setting expectations on what is and what is not appropriate, right? Second, once you kind of get past that, is what are some of these ways that AI can be used to help develop learner proficiency, language proficiency. Those are great. I would say those are a little bit secondary in terms of compared to like the basics of like cheating and them using it for everything, ways you don't want them to.
Maybe I can add a couple points here. I think the AI concept is new, but the learner training is not new in the computer-assisted language learning, right? We have a lot of research being conducted, and one thing I might recommend humbly is if the instructor does not, manage this training, students will themselves. And at that point, you don't know where they're learning, how they're learning, and what they're learning. So I think my humble recommendation will be, manage that learning yourself as an instructor. If you can provide the training, and resources, that's perfect. If can't, at least provide a framework for them how to learn, where to learn, and how to actually evaluate that learning material, so that eventually they become, they have autonomy, autonomy of learning to basically operationalize what they're expected to do so.
I have one last question, even though there's a hefty question in the chat that you might want to think about together and answer on your research page. And there's also a question about professional development. What kinds of, if we're not going to take your course in the summer, which I'm sure we'd all love to, and I hope we get information about that. What kind of professional development do you suggest for faculty, for instructors, both in folks who are language instructors, but maybe across disciplines in terms of using technology?
I'm putting in the chat right now a link to this course from Auburn University that I think is open to everyone. I've never actually gone in and looked at it, so I'm sure I think it's a great resource. I mean, I think that is, unfortunately, my answer is going to be, I think that is the challenge of the day, is like, how do we get I hate to go back to pandemic times, but this kind of sudden everything getting turned on its head, or the sudden need for these new skills and new literacy. How do we get that to everybody? That's that's the issue. Like I said earlier, there's lots of resources out there. I think, you know, individuals doing what they can, picking 1 or 2 resources to try to work through on their own, institutions or cross institutions, or I don't know. I mean, I think there are some benefits and maybe some drawbacks too if there was a course from I don't know who that entity would be, the US government, Department of Education. Here's a course for all instructors for AI literacy. That I think would be great. Or if there's anybody out there has funding where we can make something like this available to more people, send that our way. But I think that like kind of at the institution or kind of institutions banding together to try to find something that can be accessible to more people. That's the big question right now.
Thank you so much.
And I think there's responsibility here for, like, I'm gonna put some name here, International Language Testing Association, American Association of Applied Linguistics, right? So these kind of agencies, I think, needs to put their hands under, this responsibility and maybe, help designing these courses and scale up this training to the large populations.
All right. Thank you so much. Big thank you to our panelists and our facilitators today. This was very engaging. Our audience seems to have many questions. Please note that some of these questions may be answered and placed on the webpage for further convenience to you. Also, please check your emails as we will be sending out a recording of this webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you once again, panelists and facilitators. This was awesome. Thank you, audience, for joining us today. Please enjoy the rest of the day and see you at the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.